Thank you, Kim. Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg, Zichrona Livracha, her memory may it be a blessing, had in her office a closet full of collars. The technical term I have learned is jabot, and she and Sandra Day O'Connor, the first female justices on the U.S. Supreme Court, started to wear them as feminine alternatives to the masculine shirt collar and necktie that justices' robes were designed to accent. Some jabots were given to her as gifts by world leaders and artists, and others were lovingly made by her admirers. As her career progressed, the collar became a statement of admiration, even used as dress-up costumes by young girls looking up to her. Now, it's interesting that in recent years, it was noted by eagle-eyed court watchers that Justice Ginsburg's collar of choice revealed much about the position that she was going to take on the court that day. For example, this gold-embellished collar, given to her by her law clerks, was worn whenever she was to announce a majority opinion. Last year, Moment magazine commissioned a collar in her honor called the Tzedek collar. It was in recognition of her lifelong pursuit of tzedek, or justice. You can see that in delicate embroidery are the 3 Hebrew letters of the word for justice. Tzadi Dalid Kuf, for tzedek. But Justice Ginsburg's most famous collar was this one, the Dissent collar. Whenever Justice Ginsburg prepared a dissenting opinion, this was the collar she wore. The dark colors and rhinestone design certainly stood out from her collection of predominantly white lace jabots. She once remarked, "It looks fitting for dissent." I dissent. These 2 words became her signature catchphrase. I dissent is a hallmark of free speech in which she took her rightful opportunity to share an alternative opinion, another side of the case at hand. I dissent. It's very Jewish, too. After all, the entire Talmud is a collection of the rabbis' opinions and rulings, including the dissenting voices that did not end up becoming the normative practice of Judaism. At its foundation, Judaism is a culture of tolerant debate and healthy dissent. Elu ve'elu divrei Elohim chayim. These and these are both words of the living God, our tradition teaches. Every opinion, if brought with honesty and integrity, is a reflection of the divine. It's interesting then that in this day and age, in which Ruth Bader Ginsburg was so revered and respected for her dissenting opinions, that dissent in the public arena is often shot down. We live in a society in which ideological purity is often used as a battle axe in our public discourse, and a dissenting opinion places a person outside of the camp of respectability. How many of you have seen something like this appear on your Facebook feed this year? If you think this is okay, unfriend me immediately. I have nothing to speak to you about. The this can be anywhere on the map, from political opinion and policy to support for Israel or disagreement with it. The common thread is that if you support someone or something that is seen as unacceptable, you are canceled. Today, we often hear of cancel culture, in which someone whose ideas, actions, or statements from the past or present are met with an immediate rejection and cancellation, as it were, of their place in our society. Intolerance for opposing views, public shaming, and ostracism are all forms of cancel culture. They dissolve complexity into moral certainty. We know that many celebrities and powerful people have been called out and canceled in recent years. There are some who have been canceled because of terrible, despicable actions. Discoveries such as racist slurs, sexual harassment, and anti-Semitism have brought to light the moral failings of many people with great power and privilege. The attention that has been given to these actions has been effective in combating sexism, racism, and other types of abuse or harmful wrongdoing to others. It has held people accountable for their actions in ways that were not possible in the past. But the quick embrace of canceling has its own side effects that I think have a significant downside. Because in promoting discourse that celebrates a complete and utter rejection of a person, we eliminate any potential for tshuva, or repentance. On Yom Kippur, as we think a lot about this process of tshuva, I want us to take some time to focus on the ways in which our Jewish notions of repentance might help us understand the limits of cancel culture. I will share an example with you from this past summer that might be familiar. Amy Cooper, a white woman, was walking her dog in Central Park in New York City, in an area that requires dogs to be leashed. Christian Cooper, a black man who is not related to Amy, was there to birdwatch. He approached her and asked her to leash her dog, knowing that unleashed dogs present several problems for birdwatching habitats. She refused. They got into an argument. Eventually, she indicated that she was going to call the police. He was recording her with his phone while this was going on, and she said to him, "I'm going to tell them there's an African-American man threatening my life." The video went viral. She was fired from her finance job and was canceled. Make no mistake, what Amy Cooper did was truly terrible. The reaction to her video brought forth important conversations about the prevalence of black people being the target of false allegations to the police, highlighted only days later by the tragic killing of George Floyd. In an interview a few days after the incident, Mr. Cooper was asked to reflect on the experience, and in particular, the public response to Amy Cooper. He said he'd felt exhausted, exposed, and profoundly conflicted, particularly about Ms. Cooper's fate. This is what he said: "Any of us can make, not necessarily a racist mistake, but a mistake. And to get that kind of tidal wave in such a compressed period of time, it's got to hurt. I'm not excusing the racism," he said, "but I don't know if her life needed to be torn apart." Let's think about what happened to Amy Cooper. She was exposed for her racism, but was run out of town with no chance to do tshuva. And Christopher Cooper, the victim in this encounter, was allowing her to be human in a way that all of the reactionaries on Facebook and Twitter were not. Indeed, even as far back as Talmudic times, we Jews have our own version of cancel culture. It fell hardest on a young scholar who could not wrap his head around God in a world of injustice and did not refrain from saying so. His name was Elisha ben Abuya. According to stories told about him, even as a young student, Elisha could not resist secular scholarship, music, and the culture of the Greek world around him. He used to keep forbidden books hidden in his clothes and could often be heard humming a Greek tune. But he dutifully learned and taught, and he became an esteemed rabbinic leader, until one day when he witnessed the death of a child who fell from a tree in the process of fulfilling a mitzvah. That broke his faith. He never returned, even going so far, according to one account, as to drop by houses of study to convince young men not to waste their time on Torah, but to pursue careers in the trades instead. For his apostasy, Elisha ben Abuya earned the name Acher, meaning other, and he was denied a place in the world to come. He was canceled for eternity. Now, you might think from this story about Acher that Judaism stands firmly on the side of cancel culture. But there is a coda to Elisha ben Abuya's story, and the Talmud makes sure to tell it. Elisha, you see, had a student, Rabbi Meir, who did not cancel Elisha. Instead, he went out of his way to keep seeking him out as a teacher, to continue learning from him to his dying day. By remaining in conversation with the Acher, the other, Rabbi Meir chose to do something tremendously hard, something that he had learned not from the cancel culture, but from an alternative ethos that also emerges from our tradition, Chevruta culture. In Chevruta culture, a pair of students are encouraged to disagree in order to mine the truth. In Chevruta culture, you stay in conversation, keep pushing, keep probing, trying to convince the person who feels very differently from you of the merit of your perspective. Cancel culture is seductive in its clarity and in the satisfaction it brings of feeling morally in the right. That is exactly why it should give us pause. What happens when we cancel people or ideas? We think of it as a win or a mic drop that stops the dialogue. But more often, things do not get better. In fact, they often get worse. The people who cancel stop listening. The canceled often entrench. I want to share one more story from this summer that went in a different direction. Those of you who know my husband Greg might know that he is a big Philadelphia Eagles football fan. So it was with great sadness and concern that he told me about an anti-Semitic screed made in July by the Eagles player Deshaun Jackson. Many rightly condemned him and then vowed to shut him down and have him thrown out of the NFL. But New England Patriots player Julian Edelman made a different move. Edelman, who happens to be Jewish, posted a video on Instagram directed to Deshaun Jackson. He said, "I know Deshaun said some ugly things, but I do see an opportunity to have a conversation. It's really hard to see the challenges a community can face when you're not part of it. What we need to do is to listen, to learn, to act. We need to have uncomfortable conversations if we're going to have real change." So to that end, he said, "Deshaun, let's do a deal. How about we go to DC and I take you to the Holocaust Museum and you take me to the Museum of African American History and Culture. Afterwards, we'll grab some burgers and we'll have those uncomfortable conversations." Deshaun Jackson agreed. And though the museums, of course, are not yet open for visitors, and the burgers will have to wait, their conversation has already begun. Cancel culture or Chevruta culture. It's our choice. Cancel culture is based on the heartless assertion that people can't and won't ever change. In Judaism, we learn the opposite. People can improve, and repentance is even greater than perfection. Last night during Kol Nidre, we opened the service with these words, Anu matirin lehitpalel im ha'avaryanim. We grant permission to pray with the transgressors. For no true community excludes those who have stumbled and fallen. For those who have stumbled in serious ways, those who have hurt and caused great pain, there is a process to make things better. That process is tshuva. As Maimonides teaches us, there are 5 specific steps that a person must undertake to go through tshuva. First, the bad actor must own the harm perpetrated, ideally publicly. Second, they must do the hard internal work to become the kind of person who does not harm in this way. It's a massive undertaking, which demands tremendous introspection and confrontation of unpleasant aspects of the self. Third, they must make restitution for harm done, in whatever way that might be possible. Then, fourth, they must apologize sincerely to the victim. And lastly, the next time they are confronted with the opportunity to commit a similar misdeed, they must make a different, better choice. Can we as a society and as individuals find ways to make space for people to actually go through the process of tshuva? Can we allow them that potential? Our tradition teaches that the gates of tshuva are always open. Cancel culture slams them shut and throws away the key. Forgiveness is not given freely, it must be earned, but for those who are willing to do the real work, will we be willing to make room? There are people who can and do go through a transformative experience to understand their past actions, take accountability, make restitution, apologize sincerely, and make new and better choices. I believe with all my heart that this kind of change is possible for all of us. And for the sake of tshuva, we must help to keep those gates open for those who have the strength to walk through them. Gemar Chatima Tova.